Prime Minister, thank you very much for this interview and at reasonably short notice, but we're very pleased to be speaking with you. Can you describe in general terms the extent of the damage that Israel inflicted on Lebanon last year?
Well, we're talking now about, let's say, the physical and the non-direct damages. The physical damages has been already assessed in a report that was submitted by Lebanon to the conference of Stockholm, and later on in a year-end report that was made, in which total physical damages amounted to about $2.8 billion. And the non-physical damage that pertains to the impact on the GDP and its future impact for the coming years, because the year 2006, Lebanon was expecting to have, and this is based on the performance of the economy during the first 6 months of the year, up till the end of June, we were expecting a minimum growth of about 6%. And it is estimated that, according to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, that we will be having a recession of about 5%. So there is a real dip of about 11% to where we should have been in terms of GDP. And this definitely has an impact over the coming years. So if we really want to look at things in a matter of a number of years, we're talking about in excess of $10 billion. Now this thing is definitely, we're talking about the material impact and not really counting the loss of lives and those who really suffered from injuries, and people who lost a limb, lost a hand, or any continuous suffering. This is besides what we had already experienced in terms of a large number of the population who had to leave their residences and stay for over a month outside that. So this, let's say, cruel invasion that was inflicted on Lebanon is one of the, let's say, the most far-reaching in its results compared to the previous 6 invasions which Lebanon suffered over the past few decades from Israel. And the most recent actually was the one that took place in '96, and before that in '93. And we remember the invasion that really led them to occupy the city of Beirut in the year 1982. So, I mean, Lebanon has suffered a great deal of the various invasions that were made by Israel.
So was the damage that was inflicted disproportionate in your mind to the provocation?
Well, you see, definitely it's not my let's say, description of the thing. It's a description of so many countries around the world and so many leaders that the reaction that was made by Israel is definitely disproportionate to what you call it to be the provocation that was made across the blue line. But let me rush in here to say, correct that there has been a crossing across the blue line of the Hezbollah fighters, and they abducted 2 soldiers. But let's look at the reasons, and you'll find out it is the occupation. Israel is still occupying a part of the country. It is in the Sheba farms. And Israel is still detaining a number of Lebanese. And Israel at the same time is still denying to give Lebanon the maps of the landmines that it planted in Lebanon. And Israel every day is violating our airspace. So we'll find out that it is these provocations that were made by Israel that led to the crossing of the blue line. I'm not trying to give justification. I'm trying to be descriptive of the thing and to find out that it is the occupation that is the origin of the problem. And this leads us to the continuation of the occupation, not only to parts of Lebanon, but to parts of Syria and to Gaza and the West Bank. And this is the real source of the continuation of the problems that this part of the world is suffering, and the continuation of the Arab-Israeli conflict that is leading to this instability in the region, and that is spilling over into so many other areas around the world.
It sounds like Israel is the bully of the neighborhood.
Well, that's correct. It is, in fact. And I believe that this bully, which we're talking about, it's high time to try to learn from that one should draw from the latest invasion. And this should have been the lessons that one should have been drawing from previous invasions. That force and occupation and terror would not solve any problem, particularly for Israel, that is looking to live in peace. And this peace cannot be achieved as long as we are resorting to all ways and means that perpetuates the tension in the region. Peace cannot be achieved unless we try to find solutions to the Palestinians. This is the original problem. And no, let's say, security or safety for the Israelis can be achieved as long as no peace can be achieved. We have learned it the hard way, that peace for any country and safety and security can only be achieved if that country tries to achieve good relations with its neighbors.
From the way you're... Sorry.
Yes. And this is the way how I see it, you see, so that one can learn from this experience. Yes.
From the way you're describing it, it sounds like really what happened in 2006 was an economic war against the whole of Lebanon, not a military response to Hezbollah.
Well, you see, in fact, what Israel has been saying, that they really wanted to punish Hezbollah. And they ended up in punishing Lebanon and punishing the Lebanese and killing all sorts of people like that without achieving the objective that they have set for themselves. This is exactly takes me back to the year 1982, when Israel tried to really invade Lebanon. And the justification at that time was given by Israel that they wanted to come to finish PLO. And what happened? They did not finish PLO. PLO continued, but they laid the seeds for the creation of Hezbollah. So this is what really, finally you can really find out that by trying to achieve a certain objective in the wrong manner, you don't achieve it, and you create certain outcomes that defeats the whole objective. And this is what happened to Israel. They did not achieve the breaking of Hezbollah. They tried to put whole Lebanon to its knees, and they did not achieve that. They did not achieve, and that's what we consider that this war in which Israel has waged did not achieve its objective. It failed to achieve its objectives. And the whole country went united against Israel. It is high time for the Israelis to learn from this experience and try to find out that the only way is to solve the underlying problems, the root causes. And the root causes, as I said, the continuation of the occupation. Shib'a farms, Israel has to withdraw from that, and Lebanon has really submitted to the international community its 7 points plan, which really includes the withdrawal of the Israelis and at the same time the withdrawal from the Shib'a farms. So this is something that one should really draw these lessons from this last invasion.
Why was the Israeli bombing allowed to go on for so long? Did you call for a halt?
Well, several times.
More than a month?
You see, we for more than 1 month, it went for 33 days. And we have been asking for a halt of fire so many times. And from the first week, this attack was really converted into becoming a killing machine. Just like that. It was a real killing machine that went on day after day. And the last 36 hours, to tell you about this criminal attack that was made by the Israelis, in which you see between the time of the issuance of the Security Council Resolution 1701 and the implementation of the cessation of hostilities, about 36 hours or 40 hours. Israel has pounded Lebanon with a large quantity of bombs, spreading them in excess of 1.2 million bomblets of cluster bombs. That is really taking lives now and creating lots of injuries among civilians and making a real problem for the economy of the South, because people can't go to the fields and can't grow and use their fields properly. And this is really leading towards the continuation of sufferings. And the ones that really make that crime in the last 36 hours, it can tell everybody what Israel wanted to, let's say, do harm to Lebanon and to the Lebanese, thinking that by this that they can break the neck of Hezbollah or the Lebanese. I think they have made a gross mistake.
Did you, during that period, speak with Condoleezza Rice or
Several
Americans
times.
and say, get them to stop it? And if so, what was the reaction?
Well, that was made so many times. I did not leave any leader in the world who were really very much, let's say, involved in the Lebanese crisis without really reaching him and calling him and asking their intervention, including the Americans, all the Europeans, many leaders around the world as well, in order to involve them in this process. And this definitely was helpful. But the intransigence of the Israelis went on for 33 days with no stop at all. And they did not spare neither the civilians, the children, and they committed several crimes, including the genocide that was committed in Qana, and the genocide that they inflicted on environment by bombarding the fuel tanks of the GE electricity company, the facilities there, that they really polluted. The largest ever of a pollution, let's say, incident that happened in the Mediterranean, in spilling over 10,000 tons of fuel oil in the Mediterranean. This is something, again, it is not only a crime against human beings, it's a crime against environment that they really created. And they know that by doing this, it's going to lead towards the pollution of the marine life in that area.
I noticed that Amnesty International, the human rights organisation, has called the GIA power station strike a war crime. Do you regard it as a war crime?
By all means, yes.
Pardon?
By all means, yes.
So what happens now? Does Israel have to pay reparations or compensation?
That's what we are really pursuing. And I said this from day one. I said this from day one, that we are going to pursue Israel in that respect. And anybody who really continues to really do harm to innocent people, to, let's say, countries, and to continue holding others' lands by force, and to really do harm to the environment such as that, has to really be brought to court and has to pay for that.
You seem to see, I've read many of your statements and so on, you seem to see, and from what you're saying now, you seem to see threats to Lebanese independence from Syria and from Israel, but what about from Iran, the United States, France? Does Lebanon get to be itself?
Look, we have already made ourselves very clear in Lebanon. And definitely there are some people who might not see this clearly, which we have always to be patient and take the time, try to explain our position clearly. And this I'm talking about people inside and people outside. We are a little country in terms of size, in terms of size of population, but we believe it's a very large country in terms of our ambition and the high hopes of the Lebanese. And as you know, you can't really think of any place in the world in which you don't find a Lebanese. You can't find. And they are very ambitious. And that's why they see their country as such. But they believe at the same time in the real independence of this country. And by doing so, it doesn't mean that we want to be against our, let's say, sister countries, sister Arab countries, or against our neighboring country, Syria. We want to be independent. We want to be a sovereign country. We want to build good relations with these countries. I mean, all the sister Arab countries, as well as we want to be on good terms with Iran. But there are certain things that would like to make it very clear. This relationship has to be made on the basis of mutual respect, first of all. Secondly, we do not want in any way our country to be a theater for the, let's say, the proxy wars. And we don't want this to be a battlefield for others, to wage their wars against others in Lebanon. And we don't want at the same time to be members of an axis against another set of countries. i.e., we want to be on good terms with all countries. We have one enemy, yes, which is Israel, until a peace treaty is achieved. And this can be achieved only when all the other Arab countries really reach a peace treaty with Israel. Again, for so many reasons pertaining to the composition of this country and the diversity of its population. I believe that Lebanon deserves to be given this support because Lebanon represents, in this part of the world, and probably in other areas, a unique experience. It is a model of diversity, of openness, of tolerance, of moderation, of respect of human life. And it is this diversity that creates wealth in Lebanon. That's why we want to maintain and to give this experience its chances of success. And we want others, because in this part of the world, we believe we can give the example of the good interfaith relations. We can give the good example of the interculture relationship. There is this situation of Lebanon because of its location, because of its history, of its potentials, the Lebanese themselves. I think they can play a very important role, particularly at a time when there is a lot of talk about the struggle of civilizations. I think Lebanon can give that example in which this real interdependence and inter-civilization relationship is of maximum importance. Lebanon can give such an example. That's why we really want Lebanon, and that's what others are finding in Lebanon. And this support that we are probably getting from other countries and other, let's say, friendly countries, because they see in Lebanon what it can help, what it stores of certain potentials in it.
I saw in the Lebanon Star just this morning another Israeli leader saying that he expects another round of fighting with, Hezbollah in 2007. So this idea seems to be endless. And I wonder whether the sense of threats from surrounding countries means that it's ever more urgent to get a national unity government.
Well, I mean, this call for another war that you have heard from some of the Israeli leaders or something of the sort, I think it means that they have not really digested or grasped the real lessons of the last invasion and the last war. And I think this is a helpless cause, and it will lead nowhere at all. It is not this way that you can really achieve result. By trying to subjugate Lebanon, I don't think anything can be achieved, to the contrary. And the previous lessons are quite enough. On the other hand, we strongly believe in a national, let's say, unity. And definitely a national unity government, something can be done. Let's say so many countries in certain times, they resort to national unity governments. But at the same time, this doesn't mean that they will go into a process leading to breaking the principles of democracy. Principles of democracy has to prevail, and the majority has to rule, and at the same time, if they fail, there is a process of correction that takes place in any democracy. We have Lebanon, a case of a real democracy, and we have something that is not very common in this part of the world. We have every 6 years a new election that takes place for the selection of a new president, and every 4 years we have an election, a parliamentary election. So proceeding into a process of extending the term of a president in spite of the will of the people really is the thing that really led, among other things, to the situation that ultimately ended with the assassination of Prime Minister Hariri, and later on by other assassinations, the withdrawal of the Syrian from Lebanon, and at the same time the complications that are being made to the international tribunal that we are trying to have. We want definitely to prove to the world that no problem can be achieved through, let's say, negative and procedures that are not democratic. It's not possible to change a democratically elected government by going to the street, while everybody knows that this government has a majority in the parliament to start with. Secondly, everybody knows as well. I mean, it has been proven, it's not something, that this government relies on a majority among the population. In spite of that, we say that it is enough to really talk in terms of numbers. The numbers have been already put forward for everybody, so everybody knows that. let's get back to principles, that we have to really sit down and talk and try to arrive at an understanding. And this cannot be achieved while everybody is in the street and trying to create further tensions among the Lebanese and among the various, let's say, diverse groups in the country. The best thing is to get back to the table of dialogue and try to really look into all the matters that would lead towards not only the formation of a national unity government, which we have already, but to discuss other aspects that we have to really get to terms that ultimately there is nothing that can protect the Lebanese and their present and their future other than a real just state that prevails all over Lebanon, in which there won't be any weapon or any authority in the country other than the authority of the Lebanese state as such. So we have to really move in that direction. And the calls to have, let's say, a call for disobedience, civil disobedience, is not something helpful. To the contrary, this is some sort of a coup d'etat that's being made against the Lebanese state. So I say that, but at the same time, we are really doing every effort in order to continue extending our hand to our countrymen, because these are our people. These are our brothers and sons. We have to bring them and we have to sit down with them. We have a clear and continuous duty in order to carry on this process so that we can achieve final results. We will do that. We will try to continue to be very creative in our discussion with them, so that we'll finally get to something that will lead to be, let's say, able to handle all the matters that are, let's say, subject of disagreement among the Lebanese for the time being.
But Prime Minister, you call Lebanon a democracy, but as I understand it, the last census was in 1932 or something.
Yes.
And the electoral boundaries must, who knows what the population and where it is, but I would imagine that something like 40% surely of Lebanon's population must be Shia Muslim, which is closely connected to Hezbollah, which is in the opposition, and a very big proportion of the Christian population would support General Aoun, I would think. So if you put those two forces together in electoral terms, surely that's a very big, if not a majority, very close to it. Would that not be true?
Well, I think one has to differentiate between some of the appearances that create sometimes certain perceptions and some of let's say, the facts. Let's try to really look into this thing differently. Effectively, that's true. There hasn't been any consensus there hasn't been any census in Lebanon since 1932. That's correct. But at the same time, there are all the statistics that really pertains to those who are registered in Lebanon as Lebanese, you see, and those who are entitled to vote at the same time. Effectively, let's say, the composition of the Lebanese society at the present time is as follows. It is 29% Sunni Muslims and 28% Sunni Shiite Muslims, and 6% Druze. And this makes about 63%. And there is, let's say, the remaining are Christians, about 37%. And we mention these figures while we confirm that there has been a certain accord that was made by the Lebanese in the Taif agreement, is to stop counting between the Christians and the Muslims, and in which they agreed to get together and to split, let's say, the numbers of the parliament, let's say members of the parliament equally, and the members of the Council of Ministers equally as well. And at the same time, to have the Sunnites and the Shiites equally. So this is what has been already achieved. And I believe that now, let's say, those who are, let's say, with the government, it's known. I mean, the statistics do indicate who are with the government and who are, let's say, not sympathetic with the government. I don't want to go into that because it is, everybody knows the figures quite well, and we don't have to really to go into this. And even with General Aoun, you're talking about General Aoun, I think his constituency is not really supportive of his positions, which again, this is something one can check really by making the necessary interviews. What matters now is this diversity of the Lebanese society is the most important. It's not a matter of who is bigger than the other by 1% or by less than that. It is how we can listen to each other, how we can accept each other, how we can benefit from this model for the betterment of the quality of life of the Lebanese, how we can really use this for the benefit not only of Lebanon, but for the whole Arab world. And I think this is the way it should be done, particularly at a time when there is a general feeling in the world that because of the misperceptions about Islam and about the Arab world and the like, I think there is a duty that has to be assumed by the Lebanese because of their diversity, because of their openness, their history and their potentials, that they can play in the world of openness and try to have this healthy relationship between the Western world in general and the Arab world and Islam at the same time. This is the role that Lebanese, they have to really get back to their senses and really sit down and see how they can look at the future in a productive manner, rather than the way they are doing it now. Instead of looking at the remaining lands that are still being occupied by Israel, they are submerging themselves into the alleys and the little streets of Beirut. This is not helpful at all. And continuing to talking about who is more, who is less, and so on and so forth, I think is not helpful.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you.